we've been doing these sessions every month. We started them as lunch and learns, and we decided that evening might be a better format, which is we're seeing here, just to include some networking and bringing people that are in the community that are also interested in this. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Miniter.
Hello there. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much as well for attending. And as she said, we started sustainability programming, about a year ago this month. And it certainly has a wide message, as we all know. It's ever evolving, lots of subtopics. And with that said, and also, of course, being in Fairfield County, as many of you may already know, Fairfield County index is very high with sustainability and integrating it in one's lifestyle. EVs, solar panels, heat pumps, sustainable building materials, and many, many more areas. When it comes to the continuity of programming and the messaging and the interactivity of sustainability in Fairfield County, there really isn't that much out there from a resident standpoint. So to add to what she was saying, that was another reason to add to the programming, because we do index high as opposed to other counties in Connecticut. And so that was another valid point. And to give you a flavor of what we've had last year, as she had mentioned, we've had roundtable sessions. Those are just presenters with discussions once a month. To get a flavor of it, we've had themes such as living the circular economy lifestyle, over to eliminating chemicals, empowering water stewardship, to refashioning the future of conscious consumption with a fashion standpoint. Many, many more. I would encourage you, if some of this resonates with you, to please look at the website. We have videos that then launch into YouTube with these kinds of themes. It's very important with the team in developing this too, that you have key actionable takeaways, something that can hopefully resonate, whether it's a passion pursuit or your own professional life. And that is a very key point of developing these programs as well. With tonight, we have design and build trends that transform nature in the built environment. Multidisciplinary, kind of like the bigger overarching point of sustainability. And so lots to discuss, probably all night, but we won't be here all night, but lots to discuss. And a lot of synergy in terms of the different facets that are involved. And we have the three main ones, meaning the green building sector, as in building and design, over to building and construction, frankly, to architecture, and of course, interior design. And so with that said, we're looking forward to a very robust conversation. And we'll just start. I think it's best if everyone can please just talk a bit about what your background is, how you came into sustainability, and what you're currently doing. And then we will kind of dive into the program. So Ben, if you'd like to start.
Sure. My name is Ben Bogie. I live in Sandy Hook. Offices in Bridgefield. I'm with BPC Green Builders. I was kind of born into sustainable building, meaning that my father and grandfather were doing super insulated low energy houses started back in 1978 here in Connecticut. I did my best to find my way out of the construction industry, but I've been here for my entire career. So not so successful in that endeavor. But I found a real passion for building science, building sustainability, because I am a nature lover and I want to see conservation be something that we practice. And I found myself into a position where I teach and lecture across the country on these techniques.
I'm Elizabeth DiSalvo. I'm an architect, Trillium Architects. We're also in Richfield. I too grew up in this world. I helped my dad fix our own house and turn it into an energy efficient solar panel home in the 70s, and love that. And I also am a nature freak, and so we have a lot in common. And I, just kind of geek out on building. I grew up also doing working for architects in Fairfield County as a kid or as a teenager, and I decided that if I had to just build normal mansions all the time, I would have to shoot myself. I just needed something that felt better, and it just, so we're trying to do something better with building houses than that.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming over tonight. My name is Kate Brooks. I'm an interior designer based in New Canaan. I started my business about 3 years ago, but previously I have always worked with architectural and interior design firms, both in Connecticut and New York. And the sustainability was something that I was always passionate about, but never really had an opportunity to really dive deeper into or focus on until I started my business. And so then I decided I'm going to do what I love. So here I am.
Excellent, excellent. Well, before we get into we've got lots of questions and views to discuss, but I do want to encourage people that if you do have questions, please don't be shy. We are very interactive with this session, so if you have a burning desire to ask something, don't be shy. We welcome that. And so with that being said, let's start kind of with a large overview. The green building sector, very big name, very commoditized sounding. However, for the purposes of really all of you being entrenched in it, living, breathing it every day, how do you define the green building sector? What is it? What really is it? And also, what is the difference between that and a traditional home? So I guess Ben, we'll start with you in terms of what are those differences?
What is the green building sector?
Yeah.
So I think, well, we can talk a little bit about the arc that I've seen the industry take. So it started off very much focused on us reducing the operational energy of buildings. It's like, how can we make the building consume less energy? And for a long time, that was very much the focus of what we paid attention to. And in a lot of ways, we've kind of figured that out. So the core principle, let's stop the building from consuming so much in order for it to operate. The area that we're starting to see the industry head in is taking into account the impact of the materials that we use in order to do that. So there's no sense, I saw a great talk from a friend of both Elizabeth and mine a number of years ago where they looked at a passive house, a very high performance building, very well insulated, very low energy consumption. They looked at the embodied energy of that building and how long it was going to take for it to pay off the material debt of that building. It was something like 150 years that building would have to operate completely unaffected in order for it to be having any benefit to the environment around it. And that was like a pump the brakes, oh, wait a second, what are we doing kind of moment. So I think we're seeing the building industry, green building, go from operational energy to embodied energy and health.
And for the audience, how do you define embodied energy for the audience? How would you define it?
Well, it's like, say take a piece of material, like a piece of wood. How is that, first of all, wood is grown on a tree, so that's good. But like, how is it harvested? How is it processed so it could be used as lumber? How is it shipped to the site? How long does it last? Like wood is an easy example. That's a nice little example. But like take something horrible like spray foam insulation. Yeah. Where did that come from? How is it manufactured? How many people got sick manufacturing that, by the way? And then how is that installed and how many people get sick getting that installed? And how bad is that for the environment? And how can it ever be recycled? No. And what happens to that when it dies? So it's the whole lifespan of these materials. And
the Lloyd Alter, treehugger.com has a great saying that I love, which is it's the upfront energy. So it's all of the energy that goes in upfront before it even gets into our building.
Similarly, for interior design materials and anything that goes into the building, it's also about embodied energy and embodied carbon. So it's about making the materials, whether it's carpeting or the chair or the light fixture or the ceiling tile. What are the materials that it's made with? How are they acquired? How are they put together? To your point, how many people got sick while it was being put together? How was it transported to the place where it needs to be installed, and how is it installed? So it's a little bit of everything, and that also contributes to the embodied carbon also of a building. And yes, there are definitely a lot of studies out there that say that actually during the lifespan of a building, all of the interior renovations that take place during the use of the building actually come close, if not produce more embodied carbon for that particular building altogether.
Excellent.
So it's a lot.
it's a lot.
It's a lot, yeah.
So to touch on that and extend upon that in terms of your specialty, interior design, how are some points, how do you achieve that? How do you achieve sustainable interior design? The how, why? What can I contribute if I'm doing this, to help save the planet?
Yes, so looking at the carbon footprint is definitely one of the ways of making our buildings healthier and more sustainable. Another aspect of it is looking at material health and how it affects both humans that are helping produce that material, and then how they're installed, and also how they're going to affect the health of the humans that are living with that material, whether it's a residential or a commercial building. So human health is one, ecosystem health is another one, social health and equity, circularity, all those things.
With that, just a touch point maybe for one of you then, when it comes to the building materials and insulation, I think it's triple the insulation that's used as opposed to traditional. Is that triple the amount of insulation?
Oh, when we built these houses?
Yeah.
Yeah, it all
So
comes down.
this is another angle of that.
Loosely, a lot of our walls are 12 inches thick instead of say 5 or 6. So I don't know if triple, but it's more, it's sort of, we look at the overall envelope of the house. So when we talk about greenhouses, we're talking about houses that have much better envelopes, and they're more well insulated and they're more well air sealed, and that makes the house function better. The windows are triple pane, usually better, so that you need a lot less energy to heat and cool them in the first place. So that's step one. So with the insulation, back to this original point, we're trying to use natural materials, like a lot of wood fiber insulations, some rock wool maybe, but we're trying to steer away from foams they're easy and cheaper a little bit now, but worse for the environment.
The thing that happens is there's a bit of a balancing point where we can up the insulation level of the building. Everybody thinks immediately, oh, that's just going to cost more. But what happens is as we up the insulation level of the building and the air sealing so that building's not flowing all this energy out, then you can also reduce the mechanical system size. So we have this cost increase, but then we have this cost decrease offset by the smaller mechanical system. But then you take into account the energy and the cost it takes to operate this now much smaller mechanical system for now the life of the building. And this is where we start to see payback. One of the other benefits of building in this way, well insulated and air sealed, is that we, I think in a lot of ways we do ourselves a disservice talking about the energy of the building, because what we've learned that comes out of this well-practiced building science and techniques is that we get buildings that are more comfortable, we get buildings that are healthier, we get buildings that are more durable. And these are all things, we all want our families to be healthy and comfortable and have a house that requires less maintenance. It's just we've been hung up in talking about the energy thing.
Right. And I've had so many clients say, after they live in one of these houses for a little while, wow, this is a completely different experience. It's so much quieter. The air, we use heat pumps, but which we'll get to in a bit, but the air doesn't kick on and off like you're used to. There's almost no allergens anymore. It's very quiet. It's very even. The temperature's always the same.
The teenagers don't want to have sleepovers at other people's houses. They want their friends to come to their house. Seriously, we've heard this from our clients.
A question for you, what tool do you use to do the life cycle assessment or whatever it is that you're doing?
That's the biggest bugaboo of our whole life right now. It's hard.
It's a burgeoning section of our industry that's kind of developing. A mentor of ours says that if we did our taxes the way we did carbon accounting, we'd all be in jail. Because it's very new, and that's not to degrade it or anything to that extent, but it's the fact that this is a very new kind of growth in the industry. So it's not perfect right now, but what we do have is we have enough information to say that's better than that. And so as long as we're looking and we're choosing the thing that's better than the alternative, then we're making a step forward.
So can I follow on to that? What kind of customers do you have? Are they demanding to know, line by line, prove it, essentially?
This is something we were talking about what kind of people want these houses. like from me, for our firm, I've analyzed this quite a bit. Like we have sort of 4 categories. One category is the young family who wants a healthy house, right? And they usually are pretty demanding on what are the materials in the house and what's the air quality gonna be like. Another is the retired couple who wants their forever home. They also usually care a lot about that stuff, maybe not as much as the young family, and they might be geeking out a little bit more on how much energy is the house gonna use. There's what I call the tech geek who wants like the Tesla of houses, right? That's definitely a customer. And they're usually more focused on the energy. And then there are the save the earthers who really want to do something good for the earth. And they care a ton about the materials and the health and are the guys going to get sick installing this product? They care about all of that. So it depends on the person, but those are sort of the categories of clients.
We're happy. We try and document all of that life cycle and carbon accounting in our practice, and I'm thrilled when a client asks for that, because that's like, oh, yeah, this is like the exciting stuff for us
right.
in our industry right now to talk about that. So
Yeah, clearly it helps validate it, for sure.
And slowly but surely, manufacturers are coming out with their data sheets. And they will say, this product weighs this much, this is how much carbon footprint is, or this is how much carbon was emitted while it was in the production, and this is what is estimated for the shipping of it.
So you're able to
So
show
it
that
will,
to your
yeah,
interior design.
little by
plans.
little, manufacturers are becoming better at providing that information more readily, so that you don't have to.
called an
track whether-
EPD, Environmental Product Declaration. It's an ISO standardized process for them to show what is the emissions from the manufacturing of their products.
I have a general question for all of you. So we're in a pretty affluent area. Do you all have businesses across the country that are embracing this? Because it comes down to sometimes dollars.
Yeah, it does. I feel like, yeah, definitely in the more affluent, like on the West Coast, East Coast, kind of, people are definitely adopting this. It's hard. It's hard to afford a lot. It's hard to afford any renovation to a house,
Yeah.
so.
It is spreading though. One
Yeah.
of my side areas of work is I do a lot of speaking around the country, and that's come from, we started this Zoom show thing back in the early pandemic partially, that has turned into kind of a groundswell grassroots movement, and we're seeing people, there's now 37 groups across the nation that are getting together on a monthly basis to talk about these topics. So, and these are in areas that like normally we wouldn't see this. This is middle America, this is Southern America, where we think that nobody cares. But like I talked about, its health, its comfort, its durability, put the energy thing aside, a good builder is trying to do a good job and set themselves apart. This makes sense. This is how you differentiate yourself. This is how you offer a better product. And that makes sense to anybody, no matter where you are.
I would think the government might have to step in some way.
The code is pushing us there.
Yeah.
The building code is
Definitely.
it is catching up to
Yeah.
where we thought we were
Back
way
taking it
ahead.
a little too far,
It's
yeah.
a little scary.
Yeah, it's definitely helping.
Yeah, so actually maybe just to touch on a bit more, extend on some of the human health issues. Kate, maybe start with you, but in terms of like furnishings, the paint, the carpets, the VOCs obviously associated with it, but can you talk a bit more about that? And then I'm thinking afterward, if either Elizabeth or Benjamin can speak more about the pesticides, perhaps the old insulation problems, the off-gassing, even the stoves, in terms of, why go electric as opposed to gas, if there's even a reason. So let's start maybe with you.
Sure, yeah. That's definitely one of the topics that's near and dear to my heart. Because out of all of the ways that interiors can be sustainable, that's one of the areas where I like to focus is on human health and the way that our materials can really affect it. So the 3 primary ways that they do affect human health is they can cause breathing problems. So the chemicals that are off-gassing can be asthmagens. They can be carcinogens, and they can disrupt endocrine system. VOCs have, VOC stands for volatile organic compounds. They are organic materials that are basically off-gassing from the different materials in different ways. And we primarily inhale them. Some of the other chemicals can be ingested, or they can be absorbed through the skin. And then they also travel through placenta, so it can also happen in utero. And the materials that are going, and particularly chemicals that are going into different kinds of plastics that go into materials and furniture, really make a big impact. And so as long as we sort of keep our materials under control, we will have a good chance of really having a healthier life in our homes. What else can I say about
You've covered it very well.
about, let's say, for example, paint, right? Paint is everywhere on all of our walls, ceilings, in houses, in ceilings especially too. It's as easy as asking your painter or your contractor to paint your walls with a 0 VOC paint. It doesn't make any difference to anybody. It's the same cost. You can get all of the colors that you can get in any other paint, and it makes your environment a lot healthier. There are a lot of other examples, but I want to give you guys some time to chip in.
Well, one big thing about the way we build these houses is we never have problems with mold and mildew in a house like this, whereas a normally built house will have all sorts of problems that come from moisture, whether that's moisture leaking from outside or moisture happening on the inside and condensation on the walls and that kind of thing. And if you build the house right, you just don't have these problems. So you don't get any of the things that come with that, which are allergens and dust mites and, you know, all sorts of other kind of dusts and critters in the house that cause health problems. So it's in the way we build. And what else do you think?
Yeah, for me, a big area of interest at the moment is taking like that question of paints and really diving into that, because it's like we coat 6 surfaces of our room with coatings of some sort. And what I'm starting to learn is that even VOC paints aren't going far enough, 0 VOC paints, because one of the things is, not to go down too much of a rabbit hole, is we minimize the VOCs in paints. And the way that the manufacturers did that is by going with things that off-gas much slower. These are called SVOCs, semi-volatile organic compounds, which everybody's like, oh great, we got rid of the VOCs. But now what we're starting to find out is that the SVOCs are actually probably worse for our health than the VOCs are, because they are present much longer. Originally, the VOCs were harming the painter, but they were out of the house in 3 to 5 days. Now these things are off-gassing for periods of 18 to 24 to 30 months in the house while you're living in it. So there's a lot of this, like the carbon and life cycle accounting, that we're just starting to scratch the surface of. Quick little overarching theme is use materials that come from the ground or from plants, not things that come out of a petrochemical refinery. Lime paints, milk paints, yes, natural
Mineral
based.
content.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, it's hard, it gets super complicated.
Because this is like, you know, the paint on your wall is technically a plastic, and we're gonna bump into this all day, and it's gonna abrade and turn into microparticles that we're gonna inhale, and they're gonna go into our bloodstream, and it's cool, it's great, right? Yeah, we will.
Take your vitamins. You have a
There's a
question?
lot to
I
unpack.
do have a question.
There is, yeah.
To Elizabeth, and because she mentioned this, and also to the rest of you as well. You mentioned that there are 4 kind of like categories of customers who want green buildings. Do you see this rate of people going up, and there are more who are going to it? And like how well are people educated in this? Because like this is my first time hearing about SVOC. And I was wondering if like I'm thinking of buying a house in the future, right? So like, what are the resources out there for home buyers or like homeowners to?
Yeah, one thing we've been trying to do, this is just a side note, but like we've been always trying to green the MLS. Like, so when you look for a house, you know, how much energy does it use? What are the materials that were used in it? That kind of information. We're not there yet because they don't want us to be there, like, because they want to sell all the other houses that are not going to meet any of those standards, you know, but Yeah, people need to know this sort of thing, and we do see a lot more people wanting this sort of house, so in theory, it'll come.
Even like older homes, right, that have been renovated and brought up to, current standards during that reconstruction phase. Who knows what's going on, airborne, is it, are they working under containment, are they scrubbing the air, and, it's all that stuff that's distributed into the HVAC systems, into the ducts, I mean,
It's terrifying. If you've ever taken apart an old house, the stuff you find in walls will turn your stomach.
Yeah. True, very true.
Yes.
One thing that I did was I got an air monitor, and I got it from Amazon, and it has a VOC score, and it has a number of other types of scores, and I can take it from room to room to see whether there's anything going on that I need to be aware of in my own house. And then I have a very good high quality air purifier that gets things below 2.5.
Yeah.
And so,
Those are very
smoke
educational.
particles, mold, anything like that. And then I also have a radon extraction system, because average indoor radon can be pretty high in many parts of the country, including some of the areas around here. And so my radon extraction system will make sure that in that very sealed house, you're not getting a radon buildup that could increase the risk of lung cancer.
Where I have six air quality monitors sitting on my desk this week,
Excellent.
because I have some very expensive ones, and I'm also testing like the $69 Amazon one, and I have a $17 IKEA one, because I'm trying to compare them. That is a great way for any of us to be able to understand what's going on in our buildings. And the thing is you'll get people to push back, well, they're not that accurate. Well, we don't need them to be accurate. We need to see a trend.
Right.
Like when you cook and you don't turn the range hood on over your stove, and then all of a sudden your particulate goes up and your VOCs go up, you realize, oh, there's a correlation here. I need to turn this on. Stupid little things like that, like these little cheap air quality monitors, will do a lot to inform your behavior and how your house performs.
That's super important during we are in the COVID time, right? And everyone's like trying to stay indoors. And in my case, my neighbors smoke weed, but they shouldn't. So I duct tape the vents.
You duct tape the events?
Yeah, because I would step into my apartment, it smells like
Like a
skunk
Cheech and
farts.
Chong.
But now I worry about like, okay, I'm breathing out carbon dioxide. I have a air filter, but I have no idea.
Filters
like,
don't do anything for carbon dioxide.
No.
Only
No,
ventilation
No,
does.
yeah.
But you were like
so-
super chill though.
Not so worried about their
Yeah, for sure.
Elizabeth and I only say this because she and I have talked about this, I'm sure Kate's in this realm too. The discussion around air quality and filtration, ventilation and all that is something that only us building science nerds practice in these little like hushed bubbles at conferences.
Right.
And now to see this discussion on our global stage
great.
is like
Yeah.
incredible for us, because it's like, yes, finally people are understanding how important this is.
Yeah.
Our house is something that sets ours apart is normally, we all open our windows to get fresh air in our house and make the air quality better. Our house is, if you open the windows, it makes the air quality worse.
Oh.
I mean, you can still open them, but.
Sure, but.
We have such great air exchange systems going on that you're gonna have a really clean indoor air environment.
I have a follow-up question in terms of like, I'm sorry. So we talk a lot about like home ownership, someone owning a home, but millennials and Gen Z generations, what happened is home cost is just way too high, and more people are turning to renting. Do you see the trend of like rental buildings doing anything about green buildings? And if they don't, what can renters do to improve the quality of their own?
That's a really good question. Yeah, it's hard because people don't want to invest the money into making old rental units better. Maybe new ones have to meet code and they'll be a little better, but.
I have definitely heard about research and I've read about work of architectural firms designing residential buildings and apartment buildings in the low-income housing areas that are trying to make them as healthy as possible. So with different help by local governments, etc., there's a lot of that kind of work going on. But to your point of like regular residential buildings, I don't know how much they are moving into the sustainability
They need to.
work.
Yeah, it's happening, and as
Yeah.
long as the market
is.
continues to
Yeah.
ask for
To
it, as
demand it.
the
Yeah,
younger
that's
generation
the-
is more fluent in these topics, they will be asking for it.
Yeah.
There is a big growth in very high performance, low income multifamily in New York City right now.
Mhm.
Because what these developers have figured out is they will spend more money up front to get this building to use less energy, but then the federal government sends them a fixed check for the energy consumption every month
Yeah.
for the life of that building. So if
Wow.
they spend 1 to 3% more is the average up front to make that building use less energy, they are then pocketing more money on a monthly basis off of that project. And we're seeing a huge growth in this happening in New York City right now.
Do you happen to know if those buildings are also certified, just to get into?
Passive house, they have to be
Yeah,
passive
yeah,
house
passive,
certified,
okay.
yep.
So in terms of certifications, on one hand, of course, customers have assurance with certifications, as we know, they have confidence. But there's so many of them, as we all know here, meaning there's passive house, net zero, positive energy, LEED, residential.
Yeah.
Any differences to mention? Are they all
Yeah.
just based on commonalities?
They're different.
Okay.
If you want me to- Okay.
Documentation versus faster.
So LEED was probably the earliest one. LEED is looking at all factors. It's looking at the energy use of the building. It's looking at the materials in the building. It's looking at where that building is. Like, is there a bus stop nearby? Is it downtown or is it out in the middle of nowhere? It's looking at water control, recycled matter, that's stuff like that. So it's covering a lot of the aspects. It's trying to cover all of the aspects of a building, looking at it from every perspective, health, as well as maintenance and energy use, that kind of thing. Passive house, well, let's start with net zero. Net zero or zero energy ready homes are basically homes that are designed to be able to supply all the energy they use with solar powers on the roof. So, you know, if you can only fit so many solar power panels on your roof, but in theory, if your energy use is low and you have enough roof space for your solar panels, you can supply all the energy you need over the course of 1 year. And that would be, and if you did that, that would be a net zero home. And that's a simple, really simple certification. Passive house is sort of like that on steroids a little bit. It's a very stringent certification where the building has to be built to incredibly high standards as far as air sealing and insulation levels. And it has very low requirements for amount of energy used to heat and cool that house and ventilate that house over the course of a year. So it's just a requirement for a much better built house. Passive house doesn't concern itself that much with materials or health. A little bit of indoor air quality.
Starting to
and-
shift
yeah.
a little bit.
But that's sort of the difference between the three major ones.
And there's a kind of a new kid on the block, which is International Living Futures Organization, Living Building Challenge, which is looking at not just the performance of the building, but its impact on the community,
Yeah.
its impact on the workforce that's building that building, its impact on the materials. You know, you have to have a certain percentage of the workforce working on it has to be in continuing education to make sure that they're, you know, boosting their careers, they're being paid living wages.
Yeah.
So it's
And it
much-
even concerns itself with beauty and aesthetics, which is kind of cool. I love that part. Where
that to me, that
like, I love
raises
it.
my
It's like-
anxiety.
I've always said this thing, like if someone
Yeah.
loves a house, they're gonna maintain it better.
Mhm.
That house is gonna last for hundreds of years instead of 50 years and then be knocked down for something else.
Instead of a cookie cutter,
Yeah.
you know, same house as the neighbors, who really cares, yeah.
Do you find that most of the homes you're doing then, are they really new builds or are they more renovations? Or are they 50-50 for Fairfield County in particular?
It's a lot of new
A
builds.
lot of new builds,
Or
okay.
major renovations, like gut renovation,
Gut,
you know,
so-
yeah.
Pretty much.
It's hard to
Okay.
really impact a building by just touching part of it.
Mhm.
Like, you really kind of need to
Yeah.
have your hands into the whole thing in a lot of ways.
The other I thought would be interesting is innovation. Innovation, and my point is AI is very commoditized with innovation. That's like the poster child in the media is AI. Innovation, you just can't, it's on steroids. But in terms of innovation with the building industry, and this will obviously touch on commercial as well as residential, is there any innovation, whether it's the materials, the way they're sourced, the way they're obviously processed or applied, that any of you would term as innovative with your own work. Kind of like mother is the necessity of invention, so maybe some type of innovation methods that you've learned or that you can comment on.
We do a lot of innovation. Why don't you start, Ben? We do a lot of innovation in the
Okay.
work we do. It's all part of what we.
I think that, yeah, what binds all of us is this desire to always be pushing our work forward. And in order for us to do that, we always have to be assessing the innovation that we're seeing and weighing whether or not it's applicable to the work we do. Because there's a lot of, like you're saying, a lot of innovation right now for the sake of innovation. And it's not necessarily real. The other thing we battle is greenwashing. It's like very popular now. This is green and sustainable. Well, according to who and how do you measure it?
Can you say one thing that might be, or one or two, that is the most innovative in your opinion to what you're doing? Just one or two.
Let me just throw one in and then take it.
No, I was gonna say
Yeah,
something new.
we're seeing a big push of materials coming out that are based from plants and grown materials. And that is something that I think we will continue to see more innovation in that area. And that to me feels like something that can be a paradigm shifting
Can
thing.
you give an example of?
Wood fiber insulation.
Like we used to wrap a house maybe in foam boards, right, to get a better insulated envelope. Now we're wrapping that house in wood fiber boards, or we're, using it within the walls. But like the underslab insulation, which I think is so cool, there's this new product that's a blown recycled glass, and it's almost like it gets blown into something like a pumice stone, and it has a pretty good R value. So instead of putting gravel under a foundation, we'll put this stone under there. So it's serving as gravel basically, but it's also giving an R value. So we have underslab insulation.
And it's
without
a waste, it's
foam.
100% waste stream product. It's the glass that the glass recycling industry can't reuse to make more products. So it's normally a waste stream. And
So
we're
that's
turning it
super
into
cool.
insulation. And it's being manufactured in a facility that's using all renewable energy.
How do you
Yeah,
decide
and
to
the
use the material?
What's that?
How do you decide to use
Well,
this new
we'll
material?
come across the
like this?
material like at a show or something, right? Or someone will come and say, hey, we have this new material. And then we'll say like, can we really use this? Is this really worth it? We try to do a deep dive and
And
figure
then
out.
we'll find out how much it costs,
Yeah.
which is always the litmus test.
Right.
Because projects have budgets,
Right.
there's very aspirational, incredible
Mhm.
materials, but if we can't afford them.
Right.
then they're
Or
not
where they come
applicable.
from, like, are they coming from Germany, or are they coming from Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
These are kind of part of the circularity arena,
Yeah.
is what you're saying. So that leads me with Kate, circularity and not just design with interior design, but fast fashion, which
Yeah,
we
if
all
I
are
can
familiar.
just
sure.
jump in about the innovation in interior products. The last hottest topic is bio-based plastics and biodegradable plastics and chemical recycling of plastics. So that's one of the spheres where there's going to be a lot of innovation coming. And really the biggest reason for that happening is we all know plastics are coming from the fossil fuels, and they are the largest producers of carbon emissions. So with making our plastics bio-based, we're going to slightly reduce the consumption of the fossil fuels, and then hopefully reduce the emissions into the atmosphere as well. With chemical recycling of plastics, the problem is that normally we can't really recycle most of our plastics that we have in everyday use. And so what the hope is with the chemical recycling is that the molecules will be able to get separated so that the end result is the original plastics at their original form that can now be reused again. So that's really interesting. That's really
Yeah,
helpful.
very.
Yeah.
So fast fashion, which is kind of on the other opposing end, that's like, we all know fast fashion with clothing. People buy a lot of clothes, they're throwing them out. We have like so much landfills that we're going to Ghana and other places to get rid of all these clothes. But with furnishings, how is that fitting in with fast fashion and furnishings?
We
And
definitely.
materials, durability, quality, et cetera.
Sure, sure. There are definitely design trends that pop out every couple of years. The latest one is, and I'm sure you've all heard about it, the ivory boucle. I'm looking at the younger generation here in the audience. But that was really everywhere for a while, and now it's not anymore. So people who are
What was
really
it?
into the ivory boucle, the fabric that kind of
Oh,
looks
yeah,
like
yeah,
a
yeah. Fuzzy.
like a wool, and it's
So
curly and fuzzy and soft.
Right.
Yeah, well, I guess people are starting to get tired of it, so now it's coming out. And yet the production of it was hyped up to such levels that it was really everywhere. It was pushed on everybody. The marketing about it was ridiculous. And now there are, excess materials that now nobody wants anymore because the trend has passed and now we're stuck with all this waste that's difficult to recycle. And so when it also comes with trends and buildings, it's really best to just kind of ignore them a little bit and really follow your heart and follow and do what you love in your home. You're going to appreciate it more. You're going to keep it for a longer period of time. It's going to create less waste and be better for everybody.
I think we're culturally starting to also see a pushback against these commoditized plastic markets that we've seen prevalent everywhere. And I think a way that you can prove this out is like the curated, the craft, the bespoke, like this interest, resurgence in quality and craft and heirloom quality things, I think is a lot of people responding to like this hollowness to this plastic stuff that we've been surrounded with. And I have hope that, that we will continue to see people embrace that, and it will push people towards wanting to, maybe wait and buy that dresser that they're gonna have for 20 years instead of, going to Walmart and buying the one that they're gonna have for 2. I think that's something that we're starting to see happen in the marketplace.
The clean lines of what you're saying, kind of on a broad way, the clean lines, maybe more for Elizabeth, but are you seeing more commonality, it would seem, with architecture, new builds, sustainable of course, but with clean lines, almost like more modern as opposed to traditional lines?
Yeah,
Irrespective of,
we're definitely in a modern
yeah,
trend right now, which is
Okay.
great, but I don't know if that affects the product material.
no, it doesn't.
But yeah, that's definitely a thing, sort of cleaner living.
more lines and clean lines.
Yeah, more like cleaner houses almost, more of a Danish style aesthetic, with just and less stuff.
Yes.
Less stuff.
So, one of maybe the last points to bring up would be the lovely point of geothermal. And so, it's
Your favorite topic, right?
so.
Ben and I are getting on our.
Yes, redboards and porches are coming
I've
out.
always been intrigued with geothermal because, it's less land intrusive, right? You don't see it.
Well, you don't see the little condenser
Like a
that
solar
sits on the
panel.
side of your house. Right. Yeah, people are in love with the idea of geothermal, and it sounds super cool because, oh my God, you're getting all the heat or cool out of the earth.
Mhm.
You are, but basically that's called ground source heat pump. It's a heat pump technology, which is sort of like the way your refrigerator works. I can't talk about the physics as well as Ben might be able to, but like basically, you're moving heat or cool from one place to another. And this technology, a heat pump, can heat your house and it can cool your house. So that's kind of cool. And it's all electric based, which is great because we want all our houses to be all electric based so that they can be fueled by renewables at some point in the future. So our goal is to make all houses electric, and geothermal heat pumps are one way to do this. We used to use them a lot 10 to 20 years ago, but there's this other product called air source heat pump, which is basically the same technology.
Mini splits,
Mini
everybody's familiar with
splits.
a mini split?
Yeah, but you don't need the wells in the ground. And air source heat pumps have evolved, mini splits have evolved to be basically the same efficiency as geothermal. So there's no need anymore to dig these wells in your ground. But it's harder for people to get their brain around, like, how does that work? Because it's hard to understand. But the bottom line is it's basically the same technology. It's just as efficient. You don't have to dig these wells. So we have been pushed lately by marketing of a certain company to everybody wants geothermal again after our industry gave up on geothermal 10 years ago. And so when now everybody's asking for geothermal again, and we're like, oh my God, why do we
Banging our
have to do
heads
this
against
again?
the wall.
Because it's just not worth it. It's just, and the math in theory should play out. The only problem is that the government will give 30% rebates on geothermal, but not air source heat pumps when it's the same thing. And
Completely the same.
it's not completely the same.
Yeah.
It's not, I'm
It's
talking
so
generally,
very
but
warm outside, and you're trying to cool your house, and
Yeah.
you're gonna reject more heat into the air, which theoretically makes it more warm outside. And if
right.
you're in the ground, you're storing that heat, and
That's true.
slowly that ground warms up.
Yeah.
And then in the winter, you're gonna start pulling that heat back out, so there is,
But
But
that's-
that
but-
doesn't work. Yeah, go on, you go.
But the current, and this is, so there's the American Society of Heating and Refrigeration Engineers. They are the overarching body that decides and does all the technical research on this stuff. Their end of the year journal cover in December was the need for more data on ground source heat pumps, because what they're finding is that we cannot reliably design or validate the consumption of these systems. So what this, I'll back up and unpack this a little bit. So a ground source heat pump, because it's gonna draw from the ground, and the ground is always at 55 degrees, that's ish. Okay.
also not true.
But we'll get lost in semantics here. The argument from the ground source heat pump community is that it's a known temperature in the ground that we're gonna draw from, so we have more stores of energy to draw against, and we'll have a higher coefficient of performance. So for every watt in, you get this number of watts out, which is true, until you start to actually look at the consumption of these systems when they're installed. And what happens is that they don't perform as well as they are marketed to, full stop. So for this little improvement in coefficient of performance, you spent an additional $30,000 or $40,000 to drill wells, and you are on average maybe saving yourself about $40 a year. What's the payback on that? And how does that make sense? And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that we can unpack there. All I will say is if you see marketing for ground source heat pumps and geothermal, be very wary.
Just take it with a grain of salt.
It's just,
Yeah, and that's what all of them I found over the solar, everything that the savings are usually overstated. So you gotta
drastic.
make sure you do your own calculations. But if you do the numbers on the ground source heat pumps, especially when you do commercial scale, like really large.
They make sense in very large
They do.
But you
scale.
gotta be careful, because if you don't have a balanced energy consumption, putting heat in the summer and taking it out, you deplete your well feed, and it won't stay 55 degrees there.
Right, you're gonna.
Which is
change
where
temperature.
we're losing it, and then the lifespan of the whole system starts to
Yeah.
degrade, and now you're replacing
So you
your
gotta
wells
make sure
after
that you-
15 years instead of
Only do
40
it-
years.
yeah.
There's,
Yeah.
Only do it if you're balanced on what you need to heat and cool. In Connecticut, I don't think you're balanced. I
well,
think
and it
you're
shouldn't even
more
be
heat
balanced. So
than
the data that I was reading this morning is that your heating load should be about 50% greater than your cooling load in order to not raise the ground temperature.
yeah.
So just be very wary of people trying to sell you geothermal.
And does the bedrock, like we have some serious bedrock in some of these areas, that affects the numbers?
It does,
I mean,
and
it
the-
affects the cost of drilling, of course,
Yeah.
but does it affect?
Yes, performance, and the crux of the matter that's happening right now is we don't know enough to be able to predict that.
Yeah, I would also argue that, you have to go deep, and I would challenge that there's efficiency factors based on who's installing these systems.
Absolutely.
And the data on how efficient are these systems. I mean, in theory, in science, it all makes sense, and the numbers.
About 10
Come
years
out.
ago, when we started walking away from them, there was a research project done by the Ground Source Heat Pump Association of America, the company that, the
Yeah.
overarching body. They did their best case install with their best case installers, and they monitored it, and they found out that COP was not what they were selling it
Right,
as.
very small
That's
percentage.
best case.
Yeah,
best
just like,
case
those that are installing spray foam, right? If it's installed properly and it's done well, there's a lot less off-gassing, people aren't getting as sick, and so it's, you start to look at.
But it's
you know,
doing incredible damage to the planet while it's being
Yeah,
manufactured.
absolutely, I'm not advocating it at all, I'm just comparing it to the process of the install and the impact it has on the ratings that come out.
General, very short snippet from that is avoid spray foam in your house at all
Yeah,
costs,
absolutely.
if you possibly can.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that I got quoted $48,000 for the ground source heat pump, $8,000 for mini split. I got the mini split.
Wow.
It was like, and I looked at the math, I was like, it's never gonna happen, I'm not.
And the pushback that we get, and this was on an email chain with us this morning, is the ground source heat pump people would say, well, if our systems weren't efficient, we would have been sued into oblivion. It's like, true, but the thing is you have to look at the comparison. They're comparing their system versus an old fossil fuel based, terribly inefficient system. So of course they're saving money. The clients are thrilled. But when you compare a very efficient system to a very efficient system, it falls apart.
You use it for heating too?
Yes.
And right now.
Yeah,
it's
mini
for-
splits, fabulous, yeah.
Felicia?
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna ask, so if you have an old house
Mhm.
and you're trying to get rid of oil, do you
Yeah.
recommend just putting
Mini
mini
splits.
splits on every level or
Yeah,
something like that?
yeah.
Or going to ducted, you can
Yeah,
do them as
right,
ducted
yeah.
units, yeah.
And you might, depending on how leaky if your house is terribly leaky, I might leave the old oil system there just as a backup. Still, but it depends on if you have ducts or radiators or whatever. But sometimes in an old house, the mini splits, they do amazingly well down to low temperatures, especially the more efficient the house is, the better they'll perform.
Right.
The less, like if you have a very leaky old house, there will be a point where they can't keep up, or they'll work very inefficiently.
Or what, for
If it's
water,
really cold.
water heating?
You can do heat pump hot water heaters. Yep.
So are there people to go to?
The back of your utility bill, you flip it over and there's a number on there that you can call for Energize CT
Yeah.
or any of these.
But
But that's a good foot through the door and they will get you a home energy audit and get you started down that road. When you start getting beyond the menial improvements that they'll make to your building, it starts to get far more nuanced and you have to call somebody in to consult.
Oh, someone is like,
Yeah.
you guys.
Yeah.
Sam?
So super quick question, what's the source of the circle diagram with the sustainability and building materials?
That's the Parsons,
Oh,
Healthy
cool.
Lab. Yes, Donkia Parsons Healthy Materials Lab.
Yeah, it's healthymateriallabs.org and then
Yeah.
6classes.org, I think. Yeah. Cool.
That's cool.
I have a story to share about innovations, although this may not be like innovation per se, but when I was in Japan and I was visiting my friend, her parents' home does not have heat, and I think most Japanese homes don't have heat in the air like we do in America. They heat the floor, they heat anything that you touch, and I find that a lot more, it makes more sense because like dry air, like a skin issue, it causes respiratory issues. But if you like the floor that you walk on, the toilet seat that you sit on, the bed, the blanket that you use, the sofa, and whatnot. And I'm curious if like, is this something that can be done in the US?
Yeah.
And do you think that maybe people don't know about it, but
Oh, no.
is it a cultural thing? How come we don't implement more of that? I feel like that's a more efficient way to like keep you warm than.
Yeah, people love radiant heat, and we always get asked to have it put in. In our houses, we have this problem where we make them so energy efficient that if the whole floor were radiant heat, you'd turn it on and the house would heat up like that and you would never feel it. Like, so we put this in a house once, actually it was in Darien, this house, one of the first houses we did in 2004 that was really efficient. And we put radiant heat in the floor and the house was so efficient. The clients kept calling us to tell us the radiant heat wasn't working. We're like, but what's the temperature in your house? 68? Are you comfortable? Yeah, totally, but we can't feel the floor. And we're like, that's because it doesn't need to come on. You're like, don't.
The reason you perceive that radiant works really well is because in most houses, there's a big temperature difference between surfaces. Some surfaces, our windows might be 38 this time of year, and then you're trying to keep your house at 72. So you experience these big temperature gradients. When you build a house the way we build houses, you'll generally have 3 to 5 degrees total deviation in temperatures across any surface in the house.
Yeah.
So that
All year
means
round?
all
Yeah,
year round.
all year round.
All year round.
Yeah.
So that means you can't really perceive that the floor is warmer, because if the floor is dramatically warmer than the other surfaces, it's going to be overheating the house. The flip side is also like that's heating, but we also want cooling in our house. And when we try and do radiant cooling, it turns into a,
And
it's
then-
doable, but
yeah.
it's.
And then people only want, you only want to pay for one system, like, are you gonna pay for air conditioning and a completely different system for heating? It just becomes more cost efficient to pay for one system, so people then, get.
To your point about like skin health and respiratory health and all of that, we put in all of our houses, we control the humidity. So we do dehumidification and humidification and very good filtration as a minimum. So then we can make sure that the house is operating in that bandwidth where we are comfortable and where we are healthy and where we don't have an overabundance of dust mites and all of that kind of stuff in the house.
So one last question.
If I remember correctly, there was some research done in Europe, like back in the 80s and the 90s, where I think the radiant heat was really popular because of their, mountainous climates, etc. And we still do radiant heat especially in bathrooms or other areas where we have hard flooring surfaces, so not carpeting and soft surface like that, but tile, or in bathrooms if there's like a stone tile, like a marble tile on the floor, because
That you feel the cool,
you're
right.
definitely, as a stone surface, you definitely feel the cooler temperature on that, so we definitely install them there. But if I remember correctly, there was something like a research on how radiant heat, especially if it runs continuously, it kind of like works against our cardiovascular system, or like damages, because I guess the nerves and the small blood vessels that are in our feet and legs
I've heard
and so
similar,
like it
yeah.
kind of affects like blood circulation and blood flow. So I don't know if there's any more research on that, but I just kind of vaguely remember that. I don't know how much of that is still current, or accurate.
Well, that being probably the only minor negative point at this point, when it comes to, just one last question, just everything's so efficient that we're talking about, so what would be maybe the resale value? Is there an average with resale of these lovely, super efficient, super green homes? I'm assuming they're going that they appreciate, or is there?
Yeah,
for Fairfield
it's so
County?
hard to say, especially in our region, because people buy houses for different reasons.
True.
But I will say that two of our houses, this is before the COVID real estate boom, but like before COVID, we had, just by chance, two of the houses we had done go up for sale, and they both sold them, advertised them a lot as super green homes, and both of them sold in a week in a bidding war. So they were very popular, let me put it that way. But that's all, and we don't have any
The thing,
data.
the linchpin in this right now is the fact that we have mortgage products and financing products that recognize the additional value of green, because they see it as a safer investment, because you've got lower susceptibility to energy cost fluctuations, and it's a much higher likelihood of debt service with those kinds of products. The problem is that we don't have enough people qualified to do the appraisals on these types of houses. I know of one in Long Island and one in Maine. You need a lot more than that to be able to appraise and value these houses accurately.
There also, I think there needs to be more labor actually in Connecticut with the installing of a lot of this too.
Oh, yeah.
There's a whole other, there's like a green jobs bill I know was brought up again this month by someone to extend that point. They need more of that technical expertise.
The industry the construction trade, skilled trades needs more people, regardless of sustainable or not.
Any other questions before we wrap up?
What do you all read in the morning? Do you have any newsletters?
I read Bill McKibben all the time. Bill McKibben, you know?
No.
He's saving the planet. Look him up, McKibbon. Who else?
Metropolis magazine has great articles.
There's a guy named John Seed, SEED, he's cool.
And then what was that paint that you mentioned earlier? Milk?
Oh, milk paint,
paints,
yeah. There are just these more natural paints in the world. Do you have any other ones? Like,
That's really the biggest source, yeah.
Mineral-based paints.
Kime is one.
Kime is a great one,
Kime,
yeah.
that's right, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any extra, I'll take some.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's been a great session. Thanks so much.